that would take her all over the world. Determined to define herself by her actions, she was well aware that her every move would be scrutinized. During the last 2 decades of her life, photographs of her on horseback at shows in Virginia and New Jersey began to replace reports of indulgent shopping sprees and lunches at Orsini and La Côte Basque. The public sightings eventually included her entrances and exits at the publishing houses where she worked. She was more likely to be seen visiting the New York Public Library than attending glitzy parties or traditional society events. There were many nights when she dined at home with her kids, whom she often described as the most important responsibility in her life, and then spent the rest of the evening diligently at work in her library. A savvy witness to the last century's golden age of publishing as it gave way during her career to mega-conglomerates and rampant commercialism, Jackie managed to create an impressive body of work, shepherding more than 100 titles despite the undermining corporate culture of at least one of the 2 publishing houses that employed her. As the bottom-line exigencies of marketing triumphed over the traditional domain of editorial discretion and power, she championed books that were dear to heart and fought fiercely for them. She recruited her own private army, enlisting her authors and collaborators as guardians of Camelot, as it were, that lofty Arthurian conceit which she suggested to historian Theodore H. White for his JFK eulogy that appeared in Life magazine after the tragedy in Dallas. Although Jackie was exercising poetic license with her reading of history, she quietly continued to nurture the concept of Camelot through the books she helped create, with many of them hearkening back to themes from her White House years. By design, Jackie's editorial efforts were to be anonymous. Regardless of how much work she did on a manuscript, she was old school and adhered faithfully to the self-effacing credo espoused by the legendary editor Maxwell Perkins. The book belongs to the author. She was part of that tradition of editors who established relationships with their authors that went beyond the formalities of collaboration and commerce. In a publishing world that no longer exists, these editorial stewards of an earlier generation took an interest in the lives of their writers and established lifelong friendships with them, which meant more than simply breaking bread with them or lending them money when they were in need. Like Perkins, Jackie held fast to the belief that there could be nothing more important than books, and she revered their creators. A former publisher of Rolling Stone New York and New West magazines, Joe Armstrong was a trusted friend of Jackie's during her later years and recounted a telling moment with her. "I remember being with her at the Vineyard the last summer she was there. She had just turned 64. I remember in her living room she had all these books, and she said, 'These are my other best friends.'" Extreme modesty as much as natural shyness contributed to her much publicized penchant for privacy. As an editor, Jackie displayed a playful mastery of the publishing arena while acting as advocate for her authors. Her writers and books were the means through which she would express, by proxy, her ideals in the world of belles lettres, ideals she forged in the personal and historical realities of her own past, even as it was transformed into myth before her eyes. Jackie, like most of us, had her share of idiosyncrasies, foibles, and character flaws, and there was to be contention along the way with some of her authors and colleagues. But after committing a personal affront or gaffe, she was humble enough to offer apologies, often with flowers and handwritten notes. It should come as no surprise that as she was an immensely coveted figure in the social marketplace, people would attempt to take advantage of her, and at times she felt compelled to banish some erstwhile friends and collaborators from her world. Anyone who betrayed her confidence to the press was to be thrown out of the palace, as she put it to one of her colleagues. It wasn't so much ego that led her to cut ties as the insecurities and emotional burden she carried. Having to inure herself to a past that had been devoured by the first television generation was no easy feat. Jackie's step-cousin, the esteemed author Louis Auchincloss, put it simply, "It's very hard to be the most famous woman in the world." Referring to Jackie's early career as an editor, Gloria Steinem asked on the cover of